Welcome out, everybody. This is Angela to the No Spank Zone. All right, so we took a little time off in 2023, reevaluating what I want to do with this channel, and I still want to continue with laws of attraction and shadow work. So, starting off on 2024, this is what I have to say. Most of you are starting your New Year's resolutions. And you're trying to lose weight, get a better body, have a better career, all these wonderful dreams as we start off 2024. And we're going to try to utilize anything and everything to make these dreams of where we want to go to come true. We're going to try this again. Hi, everybody. This is Angela, and welcome out. Try it again. Go this way. Hi, everybody. This is Angela, and welcome back to the No Spank Zone. It is now 2024, and we're in the middle of everybody's New Year's resolution, and everyone is trying to get a better life and do better things than what they did previously. And I want to continue with my theme of shadow work and get more in detail. So again, I've dedicated this channel to laws of attraction and why we are not manifesting the life that we desire. Most of you all out there, or a lot of us like me, start off in 2024 going to the gym and watching your weight. You're done with all the sweets from Christmas and whatnot. And you're working your way and struggling to try to find if you can lose 20, 30, 40, sometimes like me, 50 pounds. And usually by the end of January, everything's gone to shit. And you reverted back to your old ways. Well, one of the reasons it is so important to pay attention to what I'm doing on this channel is why that happens. Why do we always revert back? And it is called programming. Most of us, all of us, have been programmed to be the person we are today. 90% of it is programmed before we reach the age of 8. And because of that, it is very, very hard to use laws of attraction to attract the body we want when we've got interference. So where is that interference coming from? Again, it is your program that you received in your childhood. And a lot of times it comes from the negative experiences in our childhood. It interferes with our ability to become the person that we truly desire. So what I am doing today and what I'm going to be doing in the next 2-3 months is really get into detail about what my childhood was all about, provide you some testimony so that we can all learn what is happening. Why are laws of attraction not benefiting me? Why are they not working out? What is blocking my ability to succeed? So I'm going to start talking about my family of origin, and I want to clarify a few things. I'm going to be sharing some very intimate and very tragic and very trauma-ridden story. So channel is going to be 18 years of age or above. It's going to have a warning on it. And I'm sorry if it triggers you. The point isn't for triggering, it's for learning. I really want people out there who have struggled with trauma in their childhood to understand how much that trauma affects you all the way through into your adulthood. All of those things that we stuffed in the corner, in the shadow, that we didn't want to deal with, we put a lid on it, stuff it in the recesses of our mind, are horribly interfering not only with laws of attraction, but our health today, our ability to make wealth, our ability to find love and nurturing relationships, our ability to have a healthy outlook on life. So I'm going to share some of the trauma that I experienced in my childhood. It is not based to bash anyone, not my family, not myself, not anyone. It is purely for the purposes of understanding how these negative events that I experienced have turned into programming that has affected my ability to live the best life that I wish to. So, we're going to start off with me discussing some childhood memories of my father. And I want you all to know that I love my father. And I also hate my father. And he is a malignant narcissist. And any of you that have suffered from a parent that's a narcissistic parent will understand completely where I come from. And I really hope that you in particular tune in and listen to the story, because all of what I'm about to share is so very important. And we're going to start off with letting all of those things that are in the shadow in your programming come to the surface, bring them to light, talk about them, release those emotions, and give that wounded child a chance to be heard. Because if she's not heard, she will constantly interfere with any and all of your decisions that you make today, any and all decisions that you make in your future. This wounded child has a lot of power over you, and it's unconscious power. And until you bring it to the surface, until you mend those wounds, it will always divert your path. So, again, my father. I love and hate him. I did receive some gifts from my father, some positive aspects, but that is not what we're focusing on. We're focusing on trauma, childhood pasts that directly affect your ability to manifest what you desire, okay? So, this is going to be kind of tough, but I'm going to be as honest with you as possible. I'm going to start off again with my father. My father was a Pentecostal preacher, or was. He's now in a nursing home. And he was also a police officer. He suffers from malignant narcissism and had some sociopathic tendencies. And I don't really want to get into defining what those things are. There's Dr. Ramani. She's available on YouTube. She is the master of all masters on dealing with narcissism. If you suspect that your parent could have been a narcissist and you never really unraveled what that means and what that could entail, go to her website. She has immense amount of data that can help you identify what's going on or what might have happened in your childhood. So identifying is part of the problem, but it doesn't help you necessarily heal from it. So that's why you tune in to me. Okay. So today we're going to start again with that testimony, bringing us back to talking about my father. Yes, he's a narcissist. Yes, he was a Pentecostal preacher. My earliest memories of my father, I just remember him having a horrible temper. And around the age of 4, I started to have nightmares. And I began a horrendous program of myself of sleepwalking all the way up to the 4th grade. About midnight every night, I would pace the floors and then try to get out of the house. He completely terrified me. He was extremely angry. He played a dual personality. When he was in front of the congregation, he was so charismatic and well-spoken and funny and charming. And he had the congregation eating out of the palm of his hands. He just seemed like the perfect man. But behind the scenes, once the door is shut and his audience isn't there, the real side of my father came out, and he was vicious, cruel, cussing, and physically abusive, psychologically abusive, spiritually abusive, you name it. He had a horrendous temper. I remember him hitting very hard. And my sister and I'm in the middle of the family. I have a older sister and a younger brother. We'd have to wear long sleeve dresses and long dresses in a very, very hot summer day to hide the bruises from the beatings we received the day before. So I just remember totally being terrified of him. We had a dog that got loose and was chasing a possum around the house. It irritated my father. And at this point, he was still a minister, so he shot him. I did not know until years later that that's why we lost that pet, but it's so typical of him. Just no empathy, no sympathy, outrageously aggressive behavior. I was a very sensitive little child. I would cry at roadkill. I still have issues with seeing dead deer and dead animals on the road that got hit by a car. It really causes trauma to me to this day. I'm just wired that way. So just him hurting animals was horrendous to me. Other memories that I remember, and we'll get into more detail about his spankings and beatings. I remember him always driving recklessly and getting a kick out of terrifying us. Like Missouri, where I come from, where I was born, is very hilly and pretty wet. And he would go around the corners really fast, drive really recklessly, aim us like he's going to drive us out in the lake, go around bends that just literally terrified me. I just remember most of my childhood being scared to death of my father. If he were sitting in a place where I needed to get to, I would walk and touch the walls to get as far out of reach as possible, terrified that I might come into contact with him and he's just going to hit me. And oftentimes he did. And not just me, but the kids mostly. So, beatings, well, there's so much trauma that we experienced. It's just crazy. I'm going to start off with one of my earliest memories. My father cheated on my mom with somebody from a congregation when I was in first grade. So at this point, we were living in Missouri. And this caused a lot of anger between my mom and dad, and they were fighting. And it was really a tense atmosphere. So dad at this point decided he no longer wanted to be a minister, that he wanted to train to be a police officer. And while he was training for that, we moved to a small town, and mom and dad continued to fight just horribly. And they were always crying. They were always sobbing. They were always arguing. I didn't really understand what was going on. But at one point, dad took us kids into the family vehicle without mom, and he pulled out a revolver and he stuck it in his mouth. I was in first grade. First or second grade. Could actually have been in second, the beginning of second. So very young, 6, 7. And I just remember he was going to shoot himself, and I was just terrified of what was going to happen. And I was the one sitting in the front seat that had to pull the gun out of his mouth. The trauma that us kids experienced because of him, I can't put to words. And how horrible my childhood was. I didn't need to live in a war zone. My home was a war zone. Well, he didn't commit suicide. We got him out of that event. Later, he was writing a suicide note, leaning against the door while the whole family tried to break down the bedroom door. You know, he just felt sorry for himself. I don't exactly know. I think it was all related to him cheating on mom. I don't know. It was a fight between the two of them, but us kids got to witness some really horrific and psychologically damaging behavior. They continued to live together. My father became a police officer and moved us to another state. We moved to South Dakota. And him becoming a person of law did not stop his aggressive behavior, probably intensified it. So he would come home from a stressful day of being a police officer, which isn't a very thanked job. a lot of thankless work, and he would take it out on us kids. Um, I remember he just being extremely controlling, and he said I couldn't leave the yard, and I think I rode my bicycle 2 blocks away. At this point, I'm like in 4th grade, and I wanted to see my girlfriend Terry. It's a summer day, and he caught me over there, and I knew I was dead meat, and I got one of the worst beatings of my life for that. Um, his beatings were never just because I didn't follow his rules. They were overboard, always. It was quite common that he would throw you into walls. And when my brother became older, he's 4 years younger than me, he would take me by the ear and take my brother by the ear and beat our heads together until we're damn near unconscious. And it wasn't until I was 19 years old in college that I realized that that wasn't something that every father did to his kids. I thought this was just common. But like when we were in a ministry traveling before I even got into school, so I was 4 years old, and Dad's just constantly controlling. He's talking to another minister and he's trying to be the big shot. And we're in a camper where it's got this shiny linoleum floor, and there's a caramel wrapper candy on the floor, and he snaps his finger at me and he points, and it's my job to immediately run to this wrapper and get it off the floor or face the consequences. Well, it was clear and I couldn't see it. The sun was shining out at his angle, but not at mine. I didn't find it fast enough, so he took my face, bashed me into the floor, grabbed me by my arm, I'm only 4, and tossed me out of the camper. He did this in front of a minister. I do not know how many ministers out there failed me. They were the adults. I was the child, and they sat and allowed this kind of behavior. They witnessed this kind of behavior. They never, ever, ever did they step in and change any of it. So I've got a lot of hard feelings towards people in the ministry. My father used the Bible to validate all his beatings, spare the rod, spoil the child, and blah, 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 blah. Every time I had a massive beating and lots of bruises, he could quote scripture as a way to justify his psychological and physical terrorism. And it was every single day of my childhood. Whether he was a cop or a preacher, he always had a way to justify his cruelty. So ministers, and you'll hear more about them as I tell more of my testimony, failed me. But it wasn't just ministers. As my father became an officer, there was other issues involved. One of my childhood memories, again, I was around 4th grade. I came home excited from school. My mom had her friend over and we're all eating supper. And I think I told my story at the dinner table twice, going into 3 times. So my dad just knocked me clear off my chair underneath the kitchen table because I pissed him off. And this was an everyday event. I wasn't allowed to be a child. I wasn't allowed to have joy. I wasn't allowed to share my story for fear of repercussions. I wasn't allowed autonomy. I wasn't allowed to be a kid. I wasn't allowed to learn boundaries. I was just beaten and then preached at and often told I was going to hell. So what bothers me about that story is that there was an adult woman in the picture as well as my mom. And we'll get into that story later of why my mom never left that man and why she felt it wasn't her duty to protect me and her kids. It's something that I still struggle with today. And if you're a child that's ever gone through any of this kind of abuse, you understand completely what I'm talking about. You have the enabling parent that just allows the tyrannical parent to beat the crap out of you, and yet they stay. So I can almost bet there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people out there that had childhood similar to mine. A lot of trauma and probably still dealing with those issues. Even as old as I am, I'm going to be 53 here this month. So, anyway, um, those are some of the programming that I received. I just was not allowed to do so much. It was so restrictive. It was so punitive. It was so terrifying, horrible. Like I said, it wasn't just preachers that knew what was happening and failed to act, but there were cops involved as well. I remember, again, around fourth grade, I think. Dad would come home from the day shift working with an officer, and they're going to come by the house, and I needed to make them sandwiches. Mom was already working. And the only thing we had in the house was peanut butter and jelly. And Dad snaps his finger, his favorite thing to do, Mr. Control Freak, snap, point. And I was ordered into the kitchen to make them peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for lunch. So I did my best. I made a plate full of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, but apparently some of the sandwiches had jelly coming out on the edge, and he threw them back in the kitchen after he smacked me across the face, knocking me clear to the floor, and told me to do it over. They were too nasty. They were too messy to share with his partner. So to me, it was quite clear that he crossed the line, that he was showing signs of extreme abuse right in front of his partner, and yet nothing ever happened. No officer ever stepped in. No one ever validated that was out of control, that it was uncalled for what he would do. They just go along with good old Dad, you know. I don't know how he got away with it, but I remember feeling so embarrassed about that. And so my childhood programming, I was not allowed to make mistakes. I will be shamed. I will be humiliated. I will be beaten for any and all mistakes. So it was just awful. When my folks divorced finally at this age 11, and my dad decided to leave the family, the kids and Mom all cried about him leaving, but I was happy. It was probably the first time in so long that I was just relieved. I actually tried to pinch myself as we're all hugging my father goodbye. I couldn't cry. I couldn't find it in my system to cry. I wanted him gone. I was so tired of being hurt by him, by being scared by him, by being preached at him, by being belittled by him, by being shamed by him, by all of his horrendous behaviors. I had it, and I was over it. And I could not make myself cry the day he left. I just felt like I could breathe. Well, as things progressed and as my story unravels, you'll see that things weren't always the greatest without Dad either. And we'll get into that on the next episode as I share with you the story of my mom. But I need to go into the final big beating that I personally experienced from my father. It was a doozy. Okay, so when I tell the story of my mom, you'll understand that custody issues. We spent the summer with Dad through the divorce decree, the time that we were mandated, and then we spent primary custody went to Mom. But things weren't always great at Mom's house, and around 13, I made a horrible decision, but I felt like I had to, and we'll discuss that later, and decided to move in with my father. At this point, my dad had remarried a woman who had 3 kids, herself, 2 boys and a girl. And I chose to spend most of my 8th grade year with my father. And that didn't turn out very well. His wife, my stepmom, did not like me. I was a blooming teenager, so I had sex hormones. And I think there was some attraction I had towards my stepbrothers that I didn't understand. Because, again, there's no actual educating of your kids on sexuality. There's have sex, you die. That's pretty much all I ever got told. And we went through human physiology type courses, which taught us about having a menstrual and taught us a little bit about how babies are made, but nobody taught us about the psychological repercussions of wanting a mate, any of that. None of that was ever taught. Um, just, you like a boy, you're dead. You want to kiss a boy, you're dead. You want to have sex with a boy, you're dead. Everything's just wrong, so horrible. And I think you'll see how that kind of training backfired in my life story. But anyway, there were other issues. My stepmom really did not like me, and my father was extremely sexist. Extremely. Women were to shut up and to be beholden to a man, period. To serve them, period. To be a slave to a man. To obey, 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 obey. I heard that every day. Obey your father, obey me. He was just horrible as a human being. As far as I'm concerned, he was just horrible. But anyway, things were pretty dramatic at Mom's house, and I felt I had no option. I had to choose to live with my father. I moved in and instantly got treated like Cinderella. There were 6 of us, and I had to help cook and do all the dishes and cleaning and majority of the tasks because I did not have a penis. The boys had to take out the trash, feed the dog, and they could leave. And I was, I got to clean the whole house, which kills me because my stepmom didn't work. But my job was to tend to all of them. I had to bathe my 10-year-old stepsister. She couldn't even take a bath by herself. I mean, I was really Cinderella. And I felt very rebellious about it. I was very angry. When I did get a babysitting job, my dad would take my check and say my money was his money. I wasn't allowed, because I'm a female, to have any money. While my stepbrothers, one of which is just 1 year older than me, could work at a diner and take home a paycheck and buy himself whatever he wanted. And I found this just horrendously cruel, unfair, unjust, absolute crap. But, it's obey, 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 obey. Women are nothing, women are nothing, women are nothing, women are nothing. I heard this my entire life, and even treated as nothing from another woman because I wasn't her child. So I was there to serve her too. So it was horrible. And I really, really struggled emotionally with it. And I often ended up in battles with my stepmom in particular. One day after doing dishes, I was so angry. I don't know what the argument was about, but I wanted to walk off my temper. And Dad forbid me, as he always does, to leave the yard. The yard's as big as it's just pathetic to the driveway, right? And that was not going to work for me. I needed to go for a walk and blow off some steam to get my temper under. So I'm walking 2 blocks away, and my father gets into his big old Cadillac and chases me down in the car, and he yells at me to get in the car. And I said, no. I was still fuming. I was so angry. I needed some time to get myself together, but I'm not allowed that. So anyway, he gets out of the car and he starts chasing me. And yes, he's an officer at this time in another town. He's a police officer. In fact, he's chief of police. Funny. Well, I'm pretty fast for a little 13-year-old girl, and I would have beat my father and he would never have caught me, except for I did what they do in the movies. I tripped. There were a bunch of hedges that were cut, and this was fall. So all the leaves had fallen over top of these hedges, or these, I think they were bushes that had been trimmed down to stumps. I couldn't see them underneath the leaf patch, and I tripped over one. And of course he caught me, and he proceeded to put me in the cop hole with twisting my arm around my back. And he literally carried me that way. My toes were not touching the ground, to the car. And this is a big old 80s style Cadillac, or 70s style, so it was metal. And he put my face, boom, into the hood of the car, like I was some horrific criminal that was robbing people. Anyway, he gets me into the car, and he told me that if I was going to run away and act like a criminal, he was going to treat me like a criminal. And I don't know what happened. I think I've just lost my mind, and I think this might happen to kids that were chronically child abused. I proceeded to tell my dad to F you. And I don't know where it came from. I had just had it. I had reached my limit of dealing with any and all of it. And of course, he slapped me. So it split my lip, front and back. And maybe some of y'all think I had that coming, but you don't really know what's going on with my father. So anyway, I'm bleeding here. My face is already bruised from taking the impact of the car. And we lived in a house that had a porch door and a regular door. So I had kind of two entries. Well, he gets me out of the car in the cop hold to this day, which is if anyone should put me in that, I have a psychological breakdown. It is a huge, horrible trigger for me to be wrestled in that arm hold. It causes me trauma today. It's something I don't know how to overcome. Anyway, he pushes me into a door with my face, and he does it again to the next door. So my face is significantly bruised on both sides, and he decides that he needs to spank me for disobeying him. And there is a wooden chair with arms on it like this. And he grabs me by the hair, and he bends me over, and my chin hits the arm of the chair so bad. I suspect, and I've never ever said this, but my bones know the truth about how mean my father is. I don't know that I ever went to the hospital. I don't know that I ever got proper x-rays. I do know I'm missing an eye socket here, part of my eye socket, and who knows how many bones he broke. I suspect he broke part of my chin because there was a huge tear of skin. It was just hanging here. Oh, and it hurt so bad. And it was so lucky that I didn't have my tongue in between my teeth, or I'd have bit my tongue clean off. It was horrible. And I chipped my teeth he pushed it so hard into that wooden arm. Anyway, he proceeds to take his belt off and spank me. And I got a case of adrenaline that I somehow ripped that belt away from him. I had all I was ever going to take from that man. And he did get in quite a few licks, so much so that I couldn't sit down. Couldn't sit on my hiney for at least a couple of days. It hurt really bad. And when he'd spank you, he hit your upper or your back and your upper thighs at the same time. He'd just whoop you with the belt. Anyway, in my later years, when I became a social worker, any and all of the things that happened to me are considered child abuse, and a kid would be removed from home. But hard to remove a child from home when your father's the chief of police, or he's hiding behind his ministry. And every adult person that meets my father believes him, not even the bruises on my face. So anyway, we had a horrible go. In this particular story, he's decided, that he was threatening to put me in jail, and I said, cuff me. I was ready. I was just so angry, beyond angry. And I think there comes a point when you've been beaten till you just can't take it anymore, and that was my breaking point. And he decided that his best plan was to take me to his Bible study group. So he drags me to a group full of strangers, most of them women. I can't sit in a chair. I'm sitting around this huge table, and he proceeds to read his scriptures off while they all stare at me. My face is battered. It's broken. I'm bleeding. I can't even sit down. They know damn well I got my ass beat big time. But did any of those women, any of the adults that ever I witnessed the stuff that my father did to me, did any of them stand up for me? Never. Never. And this is a huge problem that I have with our society today. They don't want to intervene. But what you do when you see a situation like that and you say nothing, you teach that child they are nothing. They are nothing because you turn a blind eye. You don't want to deal with it. But it's not up for the kid to deal with it. When there's an adult that has seen these kind of things, it is your obligation to interfere. If you see somebody being whacked, you need to interfere. You need to call. You need to step up. Be the right person. Be the responsible person and intervene. But instead, all of these wonderful churchgoers who claim to be Christ-driven just watch the freak on a leak just sit there and hurt. I don't know how many times people of faith, people hiding behind Christianity, just sat there and let me get a beating and did nothing. My entire childhood is a story of that. So I don't have any respect for people in religion. I really don't. Take that story as it is. There's probably at least 100 different religious people at some point in time knew about the story, knew what was happening to us kids, and did nothing. So what I always joke about is I could have really used an atheist at that point, because if an atheist saw my father hit me, an atheist would got off his ass and interfered and would have come up to my father and knocked him out or done something to stop it, because they don't sit in a corner and pray. I'll just pray about it. I didn't need you to pray about it. I needed you to interfere. But good luck with that. And these wonderful churchgoers that I remember in my childhood were horrendous, yellow-bellied cowards, allowing a young kid to take everything while they sat back. Pretty disgusted with it. But anyway, so the story continues. I was taken home. I recovered, but at this point, I wasn't allowed to have contact with my mom, but I managed at 3:00 in the morning to sneak a phone call to mom, and I asked her to come get me. That I wasn't convinced that I was going to be able to live any longer with my father. And mom agreed to come get me, and this is in the middle of 8th grade year. So I told her the beating occurred, and it was a bad one, the worst one I'd had, and I needed out. So my father, being the chief of police, he had some political clout. He got involved with the principal, had the principal of the school call me in and try to chew me out for being a bad daughter and doing bad things, blah, blah, blah. And the kids at school wondered why my face was all split up and beat up and bruised. And I just said, things are really bad at home. And I basically said my father did it. And most of them didn't believe me. Some of the kids said, well, come stay with me. And I'm like, my father will kill you if I go live with you. And they're like, oh, no. And I'm like, you don't know the rage of my father. He will kill you. I'm like, I'm not putting anybody else at risk for that. So, and I really felt he would have. Because he's just, I mean, when he rages, it's just evil. So as a typical abuser person, he felt some kind of remorse, and he decided that I could, about a week after, it wasn't even a week, it was like 3 days after, my face is still healing, that I could take somebody to a state track meet, that I was allowed to take a girlfriend and go. And I went with a girlfriend that was not a close girlfriend, but one of my classmates, and we didn't have a great time at the track meet, but we headed home. And at this point, I didn't know my mom had called my father and told him that she was coming to get me. Well, of course, the shit hit the fan when I got home. And my dad called me a bitch and a cunt, and he cold-cocked me in the jaw and knocked me across the room. And not once, but twice. Well, he did this in front of my girlfriend. Her name was Terry. And Terry's trying to call. Back then in the 80s, we didn't have a cell phone. We didn't have touch tone phones. We had the dial phones. She's hyperventilating. She's never seen this kind of violence. This was something brand new to her. She walked in to see my father cuss me out and punch me and knock me all over the room. So she was terrified. In fact, we had to give her a paper bag to breathe in because she was hyperventilating. She was in real bad shape. But Dad said, get that cunt out of my house. That's what he said to her. So she couldn't dial her father fast enough. And when her father came to get her, she was very distraught. I didn't know it at the time, but Terry's father worked on city council. I had no idea what he did for a living, but he was involved in city council. And the shape that she was in, she proceeded to tell her father what she witnessed. And that changed a whole lot of our little sad story, because they had a private meeting on city council and fired my father as chief of police probably 3 days after I was already gone. And my father would call me and say, "What are you trying to do? Destroy me?" No accountability, a typical narcissist. Nothing that he does is anybody's fault, but it's everybody else's fault, not him. Absolutely no accountability for the fact that he was abusing me. I was out to destroy him, because it's always about them. When you look into what narcissists are and you understand how their brains are, they're just horrible human beings. They're just horrible. And so anyway, I carried that trauma for a long time, that he lost the chief of police job, and it was all my fault because he hit me. Whatever. That was the last beating that my father was ever allowed to dish out on me. I was 13, and I went back to live with mom and basically had no contact with dad for a very long time. I tried being the good girl to reach out to have some kind of connection to father, because I felt like maybe I needed to, because he was my one and only father. A lot of guilt trips on that, how we're supposed to honor our parents. But nowhere in that damn Bible does it say that parents are allowed to beat the living shit out of their children and harass them and abuse them and torment them and control them. And oh my gosh. But there's nothing about how the parents are supposed to treat their children. Anyway, I felt a lot of guilt, despite all his horrible treatment, that I still needed to have some kind of contact with him. And when I would open the door and we talk about really safe subject, he'd eventually turn around and start preaching at me yet again and telling me I'm a worthless sinner and I'm headed straight to hell. So I got sick of it, and I've shut the door and I locked it, and we've gone no contact for a long time. I'm no longer dealing with the religious abuse, the spiritual abuse from him, the psychological abuse. But anybody who knows a narcissist knows they need narcissistic supply. And as long as I attempted to have any kind of contact with him, I would always become his narcissistic supply. When you realize that, you choose yourself over them. And that's the only way you're ever going to heal. You choose yourself, you get yourself out. The reason I tell you this whole story is I really want people to understand what it's like to live with a narcissistic parent, the trauma that they can cause you, the programming that goes into each and every one of those beatings, each one of those psychological assaults, each one of those spiritual assaults, how it affects the way you're going to see your world forever. These are the things that I really want to address on this channel. So I tell you where I come from, and I tell you where the wounds are, because I want to create a therapy to pull those wounds out. I've definitely done my time in therapy. I've met with therapists not as good as Dr. Romani, but some pretty decent therapists. And it's helpful to address what a narcissist is and what their behaviors are. But what it doesn't do is help heal you. What it doesn't do is change your programming. And that is what this whole channel is about. That is what I'm here to help everyone deal with. If you've had these kind of issues in your past, how pervasive that treatment, it will follow you always until you find a way to heal it. So I have developed, or am in the process of developing, my own kind of treatment plan, something that I feel that's very, very important. And I hope that you all continue to watch this channel, because therapy addresses your abuse on a conscious level. But what it does not do is deal with the unconscious wound. And abuse always leaves an unconscious wound, also an unconscious program. So, why it's so important that we deal with the shadow work, why we need to heal those things, is you will never attract a better mate, a better life, a better job, better health, better wealth until you fix that icky programming that was given to you without your consent. You must heal the wound. And I am really working on developing a program that addresses that very issue. It's something that therapy today does not touch. You cannot heal an unconscious wound with a conscious tool. They don't work together. The brain that's conscious is up here. The brain that's unconscious is down here, but it is the source of 99% of everything that we do. It is the emotion behind, it is the drive behind almost everything that we do. The saboteurs, if you will, of any plan. You try to, do positive affirmations. They don't work because they're here on the conscious. When you've got an unconscious that's bleeding and hurting and telling a program that was given to you from your horrific childhood, it's more powerful than your conscious mind. The subconscious is way more powerful. And until you address the root of the problem, you're just mowing over a dandelion. Anybody and everybody that's mowed a grass and you got a dandelion, you can cut it that day. The grass looks nice and even and it looks really sweet. But the very next day, the dandelion that you thought you trimmed down was actually bent. And it'll pop back up and ruin your beautiful lawn because you didn't deal with the root. If you don't deal with the root, you will always sabotage yourself and you will not be able to stay consistent on your diet. You will not stay consistent on your exercise plan. There's so many saboteurs that are happening on a subconscious, an unconscious level. You don't know why you're going back to those old patterns. It's your old programming. So I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. And if you want to know more about narcissism, please tune in to Dr. Ramani's episodes on YouTube. She's phenomenal. She's very, very helpful. I'm going to continue to address my childhood issues and my childhood trauma to share with you all my shadow. It's so important that the wounded sides of yourself get a chance to speak their truth, because shoving it in the corner only makes it more powerful. As far as its reaction, I don't know, how do I say that? If you don't deal with the bleeding wound, it will constantly control and sabotage your entire life. And I really, truly believe that. I've lived that. Those of you out there that have experienced a narcissistic parent, please comment in the sections below and talk to me about where you are, how you've dealt with it, how you've moved on. It's very, very, very difficult. And your life seems to be very limited because of the damage that was done to you without your consent. But I do hope that after we've addressed my life story and we've let the wounded side of me get a chance to speak, and we go into even more detail on how to provide therapy for that, what I'm offering, I hope will not only change my path, but change and work for all of you. So take care. God bless you guys. We'll see you next time.